Welcome, everyone. My name is Brad. I am obviously here to do an IG Live with Rebeka. And Rebeka is someone I've met very recently, and she is just an absolute joy to talk to, a quality person, and just has a heart of gold. And so I cannot wait to be able to have the opportunity to interview her and talk with her and hear her heart. Hello, also your daughters. Good to see you again. Always love when you can join. So she is going to be joining here in a second when she pops on. I want to thank her for taking the time to actually have a conversation with me. I always love meeting new people and getting to yep, she's connecting right now. Hear different people's journey on deconstruction and their hearts and seeing where they've landed. Hello as well, Adele.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing, Rebeka?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. I thank you for squeezing me in uh,
Yeah.
on this short notice, kind of, because everything's always in flux when you have kids.
Mhm.
Like, so thank you for being here. I've just gone ahead and let everybody know that it is an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you.
Oh,
Uh,
well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
we had the opportunity to talk a little bit the other day and hear your story. And I thought it was great because deconstruction stories are different depending upon the person, and everybody lands somewhere different. So I'm looking forward to talking to you and
Yeah.
hearing what you have to say in your story. But why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, take a moment and just kind of introduce yourself to those that are tuning in and let them know who you are.
Sure. I'm Rebecca. Welcome to my car. I'm a mom, so this is the only undistracted place I could be right now. Um, and I was adopted as a baby. I'm from India. I was adopted to white parents, so transracial adoptee, as they say. And I grew up in an evangelical Christian home. Um, I feel like I got kind of a hybrid experience in that the churches I grew up in, they were largely non-denominational with like a very heavy charismatic slant. Um, but because I was homeschooled all 12 grades. Because I was homeschooled, that also put me in this really fundamentalist, conservative subculture that really promoted a lot of junk. We'll just label it that way. So I've got, sorry about that. I've got a pretty good earful of both ends of the spectrum my whole life. Um, and yeah, so I'm from Pennsylvania, moved to Michigan to be a part of an internship at a missions organization. I was part of that for 2 years and met my husband at the church that it was connected with. And now I'm here in Michigan forever. So, yeah.
All right, very good, very good. Um, Now, you mentioned that obviously you worked with the church. Obviously, you have a very interesting background when it comes to being homeschooled, adoption, everything. I mean, it's like a melting pot,
Yeah.
sorts, if I can put it that way.
Mhm.
Tell us all a little bit about when you started deconstructing and what did that look like for you?
Sure. So I feel like I had been in the headspace of deconstructing for like a few, probably since I was about 21-ish, as far as like observing things I didn't like and just like taking note of the things that didn't feel right. But I also didn't know how to ask the questions and I didn't know who to ask them to. And about 75% of the questions I had, I already knew the types of answers I would get anyway. So it's just like, well, I'll just keep this to myself for now. Um, but becoming a mom is probably what kicked it off for me. So before I was ever married or had a kid or anything like that, I already knew I didn't want to follow the focus on the family blueprint for parenting that's very, authoritative and behavioral control and everything like that. I knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't know what the alternative was, but I knew I didn't want that. So then by the time I got pregnant, I was like, oh, I need to figure this out. So I, I'm really thankful. One of my close friends, by the time I was pregnant, she was married and had 2 kids of her own. And she was also deconstructing. She comes from a very fundamentalist, conservative background as well, like more intense than mine in a lot of ways. And she was also deconstructing, and specifically deconstructing parenting. And I had seen her post some stuff about like gentle parenting and stuff on Facebook, but because I wasn't a mom yet, I didn't like read it that seriously.
Right. Right.
So then when I was pregnant, I was like, help. And so she had so many resources for me, books and podcasts and Instagram accounts to follow and stuff like that. And I'm so grateful because I wouldn't know where to begin. But as I was kind of researching everything and learning about child development and everything and different parenting methods and things, there were 2 things that really struck me. The first was the sheer entitlement that people felt, Christians felt specifically, towards continuing a really abusive pattern because they turned out fine, which, sidebar, if you're okay with abuse happening, just because you endured that same abuse, you did not turn out fine.
Right.
But that's a whole other conversation. But just the sheer entitlement of to keep an abusive pattern alive simply because that's just what's always been done, even though we have mountains of research now that are like, no, this is really bad for your kid on many, many layers. The sheer entitlement, to see how like enmeshed punitive parenting is in church culture, that was really shocking for me. Yeah. And then the second thing was, I forget what book I was reading at the time. I want to say The Whole Brain Child, but it was something like that. And it was kind of describing the different ways that parents manipulate their children, whether they're aware of it or not, that when a parent says certain things, that's what's happening. Right. And I sat there and I was like, I'm pretty sure a pastor said this to me before too, or like something in this vein. And that's when I just kind of sat with that thought for a minute, and then it just kind of like hit me with a lightning bolt, and I was like, oh my God, this is why they promote this form of parenting, because if you can raise your child in a home that's abusive, whether that's physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, all of it, that easily grooms them to just accept that that's the way it is in church. Because the home is the standard for treatment, how you're supposed to be treated. And so that was when it was like, oh, this isn't just a doctrine that went wrong with certain people. This is like built into the system.
Yeah.
So that just kind of like blew the roof off for me. And after that, that was when I really started to keep a tally of like, okay, this doesn't look like Jesus. This does not look like Jesus. And then, of course, the year 2020 happened, and that just, I think, made everyone lose their mind. So I remember sitting, there was another big presidential candidate debate or something like that going on. And I was just sitting on the couch, I think it was I don't know. And I was just sitting there what? Well, this would have been, yeah. And I was just sitting there and I was thinking I believe it's in the Gospel of John where it's like loving Jesus is the narrow way to take. And I was just sitting there like, for this to be a narrow, rare path, it sure seems awfully crowded. Like, it's really noisy here. And so that's when I just kind of started to back up. And both my husband and I at that point were like, okay, there's some really big problems. And then we like finally quietly decided to leave our church last end of July, early August, something like that.
Right.
Which is really what we needed. That just really gave us the space to sit, catch our breath for a minute, and really, for me at least, I know he was asking some questions too, but I feel like he was about 5-6 steps ahead of me in certain areas. But for me, it really gave me some space to just sit and process and figure out, what do I want? What do I like about this? Like, everybody likes to make a big deal about cherry picking, but everyone does it. So it was just kind of like, but I don't actually agree with that, or this is why I think this is wrong, or something like that. So, and it's kind of been nonstop ever since. So,
all right. So obviously, I think children are big motivators to have people look at things differently.
mm-hmm.
And I think you're right on the money, and in my personally humble and accurate opinion, with the system that has the abuse
Mm-hmm.
within how they raise kids, how they manipulate them, teach them what they're supposed to believe without their cognitive abilities catching up and being that, without letting them become critical thinkers. You know, those things that are perpetuated within religious circles. I really think that's a large reason why the church survives today.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because like we've said before, we've seen people that, or statistics that, hey, after 18, it drops off way about people coming into the church. Is because people are able to think critically before that. Hi, Deconstructing, Black. Nice to see you. So once you started down that path and you started to really kind of look at things from a different aspect, I guess you could say, and you had 2020 to kind of thank for that, because no one's going to church, right? Or it was a good time for you not to, it was a good go back excuse. To church. Right? And so you kind of stepped away, your husband stepped away, you started thinking critically. What did that look like as a balance for you? Because, stand correct, last time we talked, you are still what I would consider spiritual. Right?
Yeah.
And so you held on to some parts of spirituality or religion, whatever you want to call it. But deconstructed others. Take me through that balance.
Yeah, I didn't have a balance for when I first started. For me personally, it was a little too much for me to put the expectation on myself that, okay, I have to sustain this belief while also deconstructing this. Because when you spend your whole life indoctrinated in something for so long and for so deep, it's like, okay, you just have to completely shove that to the side and go over here and figure it out. So that's what I did. It wasn't that I was able to walk the tension. I was not. I was just like, I'm done. I'm going over here. So I, read whatever I wanted. I listened to whatever I wanted. I, followed whoever I wanted on Instagram. Like it was great. But because I was still, the two things I never ventured into, and it's not because I don't want to, it's that they're so ingrained in my psyche at this point that I feel like I'd have to do it with a therapist, because otherwise I don't know what will happen. But the concepts of God as a being, and the divinity of Jesus. Those were the two things that I still kept central, or yeah, I guess now they're definitely more central than they were when I first started deconstructing.
So there's a fear to go into that. Is that what I'm hearing from you kind of correctly? Is it, it's unnerving or unsettling that you want some...
Yeah, I wouldn't even say a fear in the sense that I'm against doing it. It's just
Right.
I would want to make sure I'm in a therapy relationship with someone that I can like when you start deconstructing, you already feel like you're spiraling out of control to such a degree
Very good point.
that when you take apart such a central component of God and Jesus, like I was like, oh, I don't know what will happen. So that's why I would want to do that. It's not because I necessarily am afraid of deconstructing those concepts, period. It's just I know my limits, and that's one of my limits where it's like I don't think I should do this outside of a good, safe mental relationship with someone else. So somebody to keep track on my mental health, that's what I would need.
Love that you put that way. And you see down there in the comments, growing up evangelical said the same thing. You know, there's a tough, right? And so I think that when we start getting at the very roots, like obviously within Christianity, God and Jesus, that you need a safe, or it helps to have that safe environment, that neutral bouncing off conversation, to help kind of keep you steady.
Yeah.
It's so emotional, at least, you know, it was for me. It's so emotional and tied into everything that you were ever taught or believed.
Right.
Capacity to really just create an unsettling for the person to where life becomes a little bit more out of control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's wise. I think what you're doing there. So that's a good word for that. And fun, faith, and feminism agreed, you know, with you. So you're on target, right? So everybody's agreeing with you.
Yeah.
So you've kept this balance of deconstructing. What was the main reason? Well, actually, I'll ask this first. You didn't stay at your same church. You just flipped to another church. So what was your reasoning to stay within a church or even flip to a different church or denomination?
Yeah. We are like fully done with evangelical environments. We're not in that at all anymore, not connected to that. Honestly, the beauty of Jesus is what kept us in. When you strip down all the noise of evangelicalism, I think there's a lot of beauty in the life of Jesus and what he did and what he taught and how he treated people. And when you get down to that, like really stripped down orthodoxy of it, I think there's a lot of, there's just a lot of beauty in that, I think. So that's what kept us hooked. And then also both my husband, we both have had experiences that were spiritual, like whether they were contrived in a church auditorium or not, like they were still really formative moments that, you know, felt spiritual, and we felt like we were growing closer to God in those moments. And so I can't deny that those didn't happen for me. And so that's why we didn't completely abandon the entirety of Christian faith. Right now, we took a break, complete church break for a good 9 months, I guess. And we didn't put pressure on ourselves to like, oh, we got to get back in church. We got to figure this out. Like, we didn't want to do that to ourselves because we knew if we did that, we would probably end up making a still as equally damaging decision in the long run. So, we started looking into Eastern Orthodoxy in like March, April-ish. My father-in-law and mother-in-law, they actually converted to Eastern Orthodoxy a few years ago for many of the same reasons. They were just done with evangelicalism, but they didn't want to give up their faith completely, so they looked into more liturgical expressions of worship, and they landed on Eastern Orthodoxy. And so we started learning about it, and it got to a point where we liked the majority of the theology that we were learning about, and so it was like, okay, well, now we just got to go. So we've been visiting an Eastern Orthodox church for about a month and a half now, and it's been really good. We still have a lot of questions about, what do you think about LGBTQ issues, and what do you think about women, and like all this stuff. So there's still things that we're, we still got our what is it called? Our sensors on for. But as a theology and as how they worship, we've been enjoying that. So we're not like 100% like, yes, this is it, but like we're still learning. And if we come up against something that like is a no for us, we will, move on. But for now, that's what we're doing. So yeah.
So it sounds like you enjoy the ritual aspect.
That's the thing. I never thought I did. Because again, growing up in non-denominational churches, it's pretty much just how do we keep congregants entertained the whole time.
Right. Right.
Very seeker friendly, very like, you got the lights and the band and the smoke and like it's a big deal. So so I always thought that's how you do church, and like anything other than that was like really boring. So for me, this has been it's been an adjustment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for my husband went to Catholic school as a kid for a couple grades in elementary school. So for him, he was like, oh, this is, I get it. And I'm just standing there like, what? Like, what do I do? So, right. So for me, it's been very different. But now that we've been there for a little bit, yeah, the ritual and just the tradition of it and this stripped down, they have a reason for everything, which is awesome.
Right.
And so
so let me ask
yeah,
this question,
mm-hmm.
just kind of off the cuff here. You obviously have deconstructed parts of the church,
Yeah.
Despite denomination,
Right.
where, like, are you able, okay, how do I phrase this correctly? You said that obviously if something came up like women in the church or a theology didn't agree with.
Yeah.
And you obviously, according to what you said, you haven't asked that yet of this church.
Yeah.
What happens, like, if they give you an answer that you don't like?
Yeah.
Don't agree with? What happens at that point in your deconstruction process? I know that's a tough question. I realize that, and it's, I don't know if it's fair yet, but I'm just kind of like off the cuff. I'm wondering what do you think? Like, what goes through your mind?
Yeah. So I think, well, with women, I'll just use that because that was the first example you gave. I know, I'm pretty sure they don't allow women to be priests, I think.
Okay.
But with a lot of the Eastern Orthodox content we've been watching and listening to, it's a lot of women who are very prominent teachers and authorities in Eastern Orthodox theological resources.
Right.
And they're very well respected and they are held in high regard. So we haven't noticed any like overt, well, women can only talk to women. Like, we haven't noticed any of that. Like, right. In part of the liturgy that they do, somebody comes up to the microphone and reads scripture. And it's a very equal mix of men and women who do that. And it's not the men do it first and then the woman. It's like whoever is assigned to do it that week, that's who they do it. And it's a very equal, like, mix up of who it is. So that's a good sign to us. And then we haven't noticed anything yet that's problematic about that. Obviously, it'd be great if they let women be priests. That would be awesome.
Right.
Because I don't want to have a daughter one day and be like, well, you can do everything in the world except be a priest at church. I don't want to have to do that.
Because you
Um,
have certain parts, I mean,
right.
yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know yet. It's very much a look at the fruit situation for me. If the fruit of your belief is causing you to dehumanize someone, then I don't want anything to do with it.
Right. Okay.
So,
Fair,
yeah.
fair enough. Good answer.
Yeah.
Uh, so, how has your deconstruction process with your husband affected your family and extended family?
So, um, we
Oh,
honestly, you're fine. We honestly haven't like talked about it with people. The we've I've talked about some of it with my father-in-law because he's awesome and he's a very learned man. He's very well read, and I don't know. He's just someone. He's like the only family member I feel perfectly fine with being like, I don't know if there's a God. He'll be like, okay, cool, and
okay.
just move on, you know.
Yeah.
um, so he's probably the only person. Everyone else, I have no idea what I'm going to tell my parents, if I'm going to tell my parents, because like I'm the baby of the family. I have two older siblings, and so my brother already deconstructed like 20 years ago, and him and his wife and family, they haven't been in church like, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years. And so they like he's also like 20 years older than me too. That's why there's a big age gap. But uh so my parents I've always heard them be like, oh, we're really concerned about him, and like just want them to get back in church. Like,
Right.
I've heard that my entire life. So I know the second they find out that, oh my goodness, the baby of the family is like questioning evangelical doctrine, like they're gonna lose their crap. So and I'm not ready for that. I we we went to visit them in March because COVID seemed to be like under control both here in Michigan and in Pennsylvania at the time. So we felt we were safe enough to visit with precaution. And my 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 dad was like trying to get me to validate that I thought the election was stolen, and I was just like, I didn't vote for him. And my dad's face was just like, I didn't tell him I voted for a Democrat for the first time, but like it was just like, oh, if you're gonna have this big of a reaction to the fact that I didn't vote for probably one of the worst candidates of U.S. history, then yeah, you're definitely not ready for what's coming next. So we haven't really discussed it with family, not in depth anyway. Uh, Friends, they're nowhere to be found anymore. Like, we left church and it was just like, oh, bye. Like
Yeah.
5 years of history just
Gone.
gone.
Yep.
Yep. And so they're not reaching out to us. No one's reached out and asked where we were. Nobody's asking if we're okay. Like, nothing. Which we weren't necessarily surprised, but it was just like, really? Really?
You're not surprised. It's still tough.
Yeah, exactly. Because then it's just like a confirmation of that. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, well, it does feel bad still. Like,
Yeah.
um,
As well. So yeah.
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 So I haven't, I only have my one friend who was also the one I talked about with parenting and stuff. She's the only one I know who's deconstructing. And so she's got other friends in her life who are deconstructing, which is great. But she's the only person I know who is. And so I'll text her like my random, like 2 a.m., like, oh my God, like moments. But yeah, otherwise it hasn't affected it because we don't talk about it. So yeah, we don't just volunteer that information.
I think
So
it's two things that you said that were very telling, and I totally agree with you. And obviously, Fun Faith also agrees with how tough it is with relationships, and
yeah,
and that's a valid point. That you kind of know and expect that people are going to walk out of your life, but
yeah,
still shocking
Mm-hmm.
that they do walk out of your life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have people that have never reached out to me in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I was ministry for 25 years. So I
Mm-hmm.
lots of people, right?
Yeah. That's crazy.
So, but as far as family's concerned, that's the other thing you hit on. I think it's wise. Um, it took me about a year before I said something.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get my ducks in a row for me. What do I believe?
Right. Right.
Um, knowing that when I finally spring this on, my family, there are going to be some upset or ruffled feathers that are going to take place.
Right.
So I think that's very wise on your part. You've mentioned possibly going to a counselor if you're going to deconstruct those other two issues.
Right.
Not telling your family until you are solid with what. I think that's great. I think that's a really healthy way of doing the deconstruction process. So I think you're doing great. I mean, I just throw that your way. I think it's awesome that you're doing that. So let me ask you this. Oh wait, just the girl pastor, kind of losing everyone after you leave the church world is the hardest part. You can tell yourself all you want. That they were never real friends, but it doesn't make it not hurt. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's
That's right on the money.
yeah, it is. It is. That pain, it scars you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does scar you a lot. So that's a great point. What advice would you give someone that is going through or starting the process of deconstruction?
Ugh. I would say ultimately follow peace. That was some advice I ironically got from a pastor a few years ago. I asked him at the time I was going through throw some Christianese at you, a dry spell, and I wasn't feeling like close to God and anything like that, and I was reading my Bible, but nothing was like jumping off the page at me and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I asked this pastor, I was like, what do you do in this situation when you literally cannot hear anything? Like you have zero, nothing. And he's like, I just follow peace because I know where peace is, that's where Jesus is. I was like, that's good. And now I've come to interpret that as where peace is, that's where I'm meant to be.
Hmm.
So that's been my guiding force this entire time is like, okay, I don't have to bang down all the doors at once. If I don't feel peace there, I'm just not going to go there. And that's okay. Everybody's growth is their growth, and it's at their speed, and it's at their intensity, and whatever you want it to be. It's your story, and your story is good because it's yours. So, yeah, I would just say follow peace. I know that's a very ambiguous thing.
No,
But,
I
yeah.
think that's a beautiful way to say it. And what you said in there, which I really, really enjoyed, was that, um, you know, everybody goes at a different pace when it comes to deconstructing. And the following the piece aspect, or you become comfortable with each piece you knock down or figure out.
Mm-hmm.
If you wipe everything totally right from the start,
Yeah.
then things are going to be in shambles and you're grasping for things, I think.
Right.
So you start piece by piece, and heal as you go through it even.
Mm-hmm.
And gain that piece and then continue to move on. One of the things I love about doing these IG lives is that everybody's at a different place in their deconstructing. Everybody winds up in a different place.
Mm-hmm.
The people that usually are like, oh, she should just totally leave the church. She should get out of Dodge are usually the people that are angry,
Mm-hmm.
or have some resentment or have been really, really hurt and they're everything.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's not saying everybody's like that at all. But I love the gentleness that you go through this with, you and your husband, and the care in which you take, because it is a life transformation, if I can use one of those words. So I love that you do that. So I've got one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
and before I ask this question, I want to just encourage everybody who's watching or will watch this. Go to her page. She does a fabulous job on her page. It's Rebeka in writing,
Hmm.
and it is a wonderful page, full of great thoughts. And one thing I love about you, Rebeka, is you're a deep thinker. So it's
Thanks.
shallow. So I appreciate that. So final question for you. Um, what are your future goals, just personally? Just tell me a little bit what you're looking to do for the future.
I'm I'll be honest, I'm kind of like at a place where I don't have too many goals, and I'm okay with that because um with part of my deconstruction process, one of the pieces that I've definitely like tinkered around with is the idea that God has a plan for your life. And you have a purpose, and you have to go out and find it, and you have to do it, and you have to do it this way.
Right.
And if you don't do it this way, then you're off the map, and all this stuff. And I think a lot of that is BS. But,
Right.
um,
Right.
so I'm kind of at a point where it's like it's nice to not have my life be just one big long to-do list.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so right now I'm just kind of focusing on like we have a kid, and I'm in a very privileged situation where I can be at home with him, which is what I wanted. And so just hanging out with him, and you know my husband and we've gone through this whole journey together, which brings you really close to each other. I'm really
Sure.
grateful to have a partner who is also on the same train. He didn't just, stay with church and like that. Oh my God, I would feel like 10 times more lonely if that was the situation.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that that is the story I get to have, is we get to do this together. Um, so yeah, as far as goals go, that's pretty much just been it. I've just been enjoying living life on my own terms for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And, so we'll see. There's little things that I think of that I might want to do, but again, I'm just enjoying like being with my kid right now, that I don't want to take take more time than I need to from that. So
Sure. No,
yeah.
I think it's a great answer, and I didn't think about that aspect. Totally. Just the idea that, hey, you're in a place now where you're not having to follow rules or lists or
Hmm.
with this or that. You get time to focus on your child, your family,
Yeah.
and kind of figure out what you want to do when you want to do it.
Right.
But great freedom in that
Hmm.
at the same time. So I think that's great. That's a very honest answer. You didn't have to make anything up, so that's good.
Yeah.
Well, Rebeka, thank you so much. Uh,
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
yeah, I love talking to you. Excited about whatever you do in the future as well. And once again, everybody, her page, Rebeka in Writing. It's a great page. She's a awesome, awesome individual. So um, check her page out and watch what she does in the future, because I think it's going to be something great. Although being a parent is great in and of itself. So
Hmm.
that's a joy in and of itself. So thank you, Rebeka. Everyone that stayed on, appreciate it. We thank you for being here, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right, you have a good one.
You too.